Whether it's Bangladesh or any other emerging economy, no country can now plan its future without preparing for a pandemic. The world still remains vulnerable to a new disease outbreak because we've not been able to solve the mystery of the Wuhan virus. Same old questions. Did it come from an animal or a lab? So far, we don't have a definitive answer, but the debate around the origins has resumed. The lab leak is being discussed again, this time within the halls of the British Parliament, thanks to a researcher. Her name is Dr. Alina Chan. She's a researcher in the US. Dr. Chan says it's reasonable to believe that the Wuhan virus leaked. In fact, she doesn't even rule out the possibility that the virus was engineered, created in a lab. So where does the lab leak theory stand today? What's the new evidence? And where is the debate on the virus origins going? We'll discuss that in the next 4 minutes. First, let's tell you what happened in the British Parliament. A panel of lawmakers was holding a hearing. This is the Science and Technology Select Committee of the British Parliament. Dr. Chan was asked to appear and testify. She wasn't the only one. The editor of the top science journal, The Lancet, was also present. Now, the subject of the origin, has always triggered a debate. And this hearing was no different. Dr. Chan was quick to make her point, and in no uncertain terms, she said that the Wuhan virus came from a laboratory.
I think that a lab origin is more likely than a natural origin at this point. We all agree that there was a critical event at the Wuhan seafood market that was a super spreader event caused by humans. There's no evidence pointing to a natural animal origin of the virus at that market.
That's the argument. The world has paid far greater attention to the possibility of a natural origin. That has been the line of inquiry that even investigators from the WHO pursued. But they still haven't been able to locate the source of the virus. Was it bats? Was it pangolins? Was it any other animal? 2 years into the pandemic, we don't know. In the meantime, the circumstantial evidence around the lab leak continues to pile up. Shouldn't that be worthy of the world's attention? It should. And that's exactly what Dr. Chan argued for, an impartial assessment into the lab leak hypothesis. But when WHO investigators set out to find the origins, they completely ignored the lab leak angle. And this lapse came up during the hearing. Dr. Chan said she'd followed the WHO investigation. She gave the parliamentarians in the UK an inside track of how the WHO's investigators dealt with the question of a lab leak.
I'm going to say that about the WHO as well. Let's be clear about how they decided whether the lab leak was likely or not. They went into a room where there were Chinese government officials, and they all asked the scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, did you do this? And they said, no, we didn't. And then they voted. They voted to see how likely you think this is in front of Chinese government officials. What do you think the response would be? Who would say that we think a lab leak is likely? So let's be clear, this was not a scientific process.
You heard that. The WHO just took China at its word. So did the Lancet. Remember, the Lancet was among the first to dismiss the lab leak theory. In fact, it crushed the argument altogether by publishing this piece that denounced the lab leak theory. It called it a conspiracy theory. Until recently, the Lancet featured nothing about the lab leak. The editor-in-chief was part of these hearings. Dr. Chan took him on too. She asked the Lancet to publish what they have on the lab leak.
The Lancet really needs to publish all of the manuscripts it received. Original, whether it was withdrawn or rejected by the journal, we need to see what you received from Chinese scientists in the early days of the pandemic. We know from Jeremy Ferrar's book that the Lancet was in possession of information on human-to-human transmission of this virus and pre-symptomatic transmission of this virus, and you did not release that to the world. This could have led to many more lives saved.
That's a major charge. What does the Lancet really know about the lab leak? Is it sitting on more circumstantial evidence? Which research papers did it choose not to publish? The Lancet must share what it got during the early days of the pandemic, like the rest of the journals. According to Dr. Chan, Chinese scientists shared a lot during the early days. They published research papers, they offered first-hand accounts, they offered observations. That was before Beijing gagged them. Several scientists had to withdraw what they'd published. But scientific journals like The Lancet could still have a copy of these papers. Dr. Chan believes that they should be looked into since they can offer more clues into what really happened in Wuhan.
We know that lots of scientists inside of China were sending out information in the form of manuscripts in the early days of this pandemic, not just to the Lancet, but to many other prominent, prestigious journals, some of whom's editors are here today. And so we need to see those. We need to know what scientists knew, what they were sharing in the beginning, before the gag order went down, before they started withdrawing their papers, before they started altering their papers. This will really help us to fill out the picture of what was happening.
And that's what's needed today. For 2 years now, scientists, researchers, investigators, even spy agencies have looked into the questions of origins, but they've come up with nothing. Most of these so-called investigations have been conducted in silos. Now the time has come to make the question of origin a matter of public debate. All stakeholders must share what they know about the Wuhan Institute of Virology. All evidence must be put into the public domain, and the Wuhan lab must be scrutinized by a bigger and independent set of experts. Because the world, frankly, cannot afford another virus leaking from a lab. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.